Ionescu, she got it!
And Stewart doing it all. That is what makes her special.
Hey Liberty fans, and welcome back to Liberty FM, the podcast dedicated to the New York Liberty. Today's episode is called Chasing the Crown, not just because the Liberty lifted another trophy this week, becoming the first franchise in WNBA history to win the Commissioner's Cup twice, but because of what that trophy could represent. The real crown this team is chasing is another WNBA championship. So the question I want to explore today is simple. Was this a turning point of the Liberty season? Just a week ago, the conversation around this team was completely different. They had just come back from a frustrating West Coast trip. There were questions about their efforts, their consistency, their communication, and even their heart. We all know the talent has never been the issue. When you have Stewie, Sabrina Ionescu, JJ, and the depth this roster possesses, nobody questions whether this team is good enough. The question was whether they were willing to do the little things that championship teams do every single night. Winning the 50-50 balls, communicating defensively, executing late in games, playing with the same urgency against every opponent. Those were the standards that both Breanna Stewart and Jonquel Jones publicly challenged the team to meet. Then came the Commissioner's Cup final. Yes, Las Vegas was without A'ja Wilson. There's no point pretending that didn't matter. When the best player in the world isn't on the floor, it changes the matchup. But at the same time, I don't think that made this game any less important. In fact, in some ways, it made it more dangerous. We've already seen the Liberty struggle this season against teams they were expected to beat. We've seen them build big leads before letting opponents back into games, with questions whether they could respond when momentum shifted. So this wasn't simply about winning a trophy. It was about responding to criticism, responding to adversity, responding to the standards they had set for themselves. And I thought for the most part, they did exactly that. Then just 2 days later, they had another opportunity. Championship teams don't just win emotional games, they validate them. Minnesota came into the Barclays Center with the best record in the league despite missing Nafisa Collier. Cheryl Reeve continues to get the absolute best out of her roster every single season, and we all know the history between those two teams after the 2024 WNBA final. That game wasn't just another regular season matchup, it was a measuring stick. Another chance to prove that the Commissioner's Cup wasn't simply an emotional high, it was the beginning of something. So today we'll look at why Sabrina Ionescu may have finally found a rhythm again after a difficult return from injury, how Breanna Stewart continues to lead this team in every possible way, why Jonquel Jones is playing some of the best basketball we've seen from her in a Liberty uniform, and why Pauline Astier is becoming one of the biggest stories of the Liberty season. We'll also discuss the situation surrounding Betnijah Laney-Hamilton, whose recent DNPs have understandably become one of the biggest talking points among Liberty fans. And finally, we'll preview tonight's matchup against the Dallas Wings. Another opportunity for New York to show that this recent stretch wasn't just a couple of good nights, but the beginning of a championship run. Let's get into it. Let's start with the Commissioner's Cup final. When the news broke on Tuesday morning that A'ja Wilson would miss the game with a leg injury, I think a lot of people immediately assumed this would be an easier night for the Liberty. Personally, I wasn't one of them. If anything, I thought it made the game even trickier. We've seen this movie before. 2 years ago, Las Vegas came into the Barclays Center without A'ja Wilson and still pushed the Liberty to the limit by playing small. Jackie Young became the focal point offensively, Kelsey Plum was attacking relentlessly, and the Aces completely changed their identity. So New York suddenly had to prepare for something very different than what they had spent the previous day scouting. Without A'ja, there was no dominant post presence to build a defensive game plan around. Instead, the Liberty had to deal with constant movement, speed, spacing, and aggressive guard play. And that's exactly what happened. Before the game, one topic dominated Chris DeMarco's media session. Heart. Not talent, not execution, heart. After that disappointing West Coast trip, several reporters asked whether this team was showing enough fight when adversity hit. Chris DeMarco had an interesting answer. He explained that playing with heart isn't just diving on loose balls or making hustle plays. For him, it's about executing the game plan for 40 minutes. It's about staying disciplined when shots are not falling. It's about trusting the process instead of abandoning it. I understood what he was coming from, because when I went back and watched those losses again, I noticed something similar. The Liberty actually generated a lot of quality looks offensively. They simply didn't make enough of them. But I also think both things can be true. Execution matters, so does urgency. The best championship teams don't allow missed shots to affect the defensive intensity. They don't stop communicating. They don't stop competing. And that's exactly what Stewie and JJ had challenged this team to rediscover. So this game became a chance to answer those questions, not with words, with actions. One thing that immediately stood out to me from the opening possession was how intentional the Liberty were about getting Sabrina Ionescu involved. For weeks we talked about on this podcast about Sabrina looking hesitant after returning from injury. She wasn't attacking downhill with the same confidence. Too often she was giving the ball early, standing off the ball, or settling for difficult shot sleds and possessions. Tuesday night felt completely different. On the very first possession, JJ set a screen to free Sabrina, and instead of settling for a jumper, she immediately attacked the paint. That set the tone. Then came an inbounds play specifically designed to free her in the corner for a free. A few possessions later, she knocked down another transition free. It wasn't just that Sabrina was making shots. It was the way the offense was flowing through her. When I look at the numbers afterwards, it confirmed what my eyes were telling me. During the first stretch after returning from injury, Sabrina's usage rate hovered around 21%. Against Las Vegas, it jumped to roughly 32%. That's superstar territory. That's where Sabrina has been at her best throughout her career. And maybe that's one of the biggest adjustments Chris DeMarco deserves credit for. Instead of asking Sabrina to simply fit into the offense was once again designed to put the ball in her hands and let her dictate the game. The Liberty was setting more screens for her, using her off the ball, creating movement instead of asking her to create everything herself. And the difference was obvious. She looked free again. She looked confident again. More importantly, she looked like Sabrina Ionescu again. One player who continues to set that championship standard every single night is Breanna Stewart. At this point, I don't think anything she does surprises us anymore. But that doesn't mean we should take it for granted though. When the Liberty needs stability, she provides it. When they need leadership, she provides it as well. When they need someone to calm the game down, make the right read, defend every possession on the floor, or simply get a bucket, she's the one everyone looks toward. Against Las Vegas, she was named the Commissioner's Cup MVP, and deservedly so. Yes, she finished with another outstanding statistical performance, but what impressed me most wasn't the numbers. It was the timing of everything she did. When the Aces started making their run in the third quarter, Stewie didn't panic. When New York briefly lost the lead in the fourth, she still didn't panic. She continued making the right basketball play. Whether that was setting a screen for Sabrina, rolling to the basket, attacking mismatches in the post, or protecting the rim on the other end, she never allowed the game to speed her up. That's what elite leaders do. They don't just lead when everything is going well. They lead when things start falling apart. And after the game, Sabrina summed it up perfectly about how she's been through every situation imaginable during her career, how her teammates trust her because she's seen it all before.
I mean, everything, but definitely experience, poise, leadership. She touched on it, but, I think it's her 10th season, right? You said that? So she's seen everything. She's been there. She's done that. And so for us, just continuing, to believe and how she strings us together on both sides, offensively and defensively, is kind of that anchor for us. And whether the ball's going in or not, we can always rely on her on both sides. And tonight, especially late when she goes on those runs, it's really fun to just be able to pass her the ball and run back on defense because I know it's going in.
That is invaluable during moments like these. What also stood out to me was how New York attacked offensively. Throughout the game, the Liberty repeatedly involved Stewie as the screener in pick-and-roll actions with Sabrina. That may sound like a small tactical adjustment, but it created impossible decisions for Las Vegas. If the defense switched, Sabrina often had a favorable matchup. If they stayed with Sabrina, Stewie slipped to the basket with a smaller defender trying to recover. And if help came from the weak side, JJ was waiting. Those are the kind of actions that make an offense incredibly difficult to guard. It's not simply about one player creating everything. It's about forcing the defense to choose which all-star they're willing to live with beating them. I also thought Chris DeMarco deserves some credit here. He has received his share of criticism this season, including from me. There's been some rotation that haven't worked. There's been stretches where the offense became stagnant. There have been games where adjustment came a little too late. But it's also important to acknowledge when things work. Against Las Vegas, we saw a lot more creativity offensively. Different screening angles, more off-ball movement, more action designs to free Sabrina, more opportunities to attack downhill instead of simply relying on ISO basketball. That's encouraging because it shows this coaching staff continues to evolve. And remember something, Chris DeMarco has repeated several times this season, his objective isn't for this team to peak in June or July. His objective is for them to be playing their best basketball in October. If that's truly the case, then these are exactly the kind of adjustment you want to see happening in the middle of the season. Another player who quietly continues to remind everyone why she's one of the most unique players in the WNBA is Jonquel Jones. I know some people will point out that Las Vegas didn't have Asia Wilson and Minnesota was without Napheesa Collier. That's true. But Jonquel can only dominate the player standing in front of her, and that's exactly what she did. Whether she was scoring inside, stretching the floor, facilitating from the high post, setting crushing screens, or controlling the defensive glass, she impacted winning in every possible way. Sometimes I think we become so accustomed to Jonquel's versatility that we almost overlook it. She isn't a center, she's a point setter. She's a floor spacer, she's an elite rebounder, she's a defensive anchor. And because she can do all of those things, she makes life so much easier for everyone else on the floor. And that's why I thought one of the biggest statistics from this game wasn't points, it was the rebounding battle. The Liberty won that fight decisively. Those second chance opportunities and limiting Las Vegas to one shot became one of the biggest reasons New York was able to survive the comeback.
I think definitely like the 50-50 balls, that's something that Chris was talking about is like that shows heart, whether you're like diving on the floor, whether you're going after a rebound. And we continue to do that. And I think that just really proud of the mindset and the mentality of this team. Like we were going to do whatever it took to kind of get this win. And we let some slip away, especially on our home court, but really taking pride of representing Barclays and getting the job done.
That quote to me perfectly summarizes what changed. Earlier this season when momentum shifted, the Liberty often looked hesitant. Against Vegas, they look resilient. There's a huge difference, and that's why I believe this game may end up being remembered as much more than a Commissioner's Cup victory. It may be remembered as the night this team rediscovered its identity. As satisfying as the Commissioner's Cup victory was, I actually think the biggest statement came 48 hours later, because championship teams don't just win emotional games, they build on them. We've seen it happen too often over the past couple of seasons. The Liberty would put together an impressive win against one of the league's best teams, only to come out flat a game or two later. Breanna Stewart mentioned it after the Commissioner's Cup final. She said, "We've had opportunities this season to build momentum, but we've let those moments slip away." This was another chance, and this time they answered. Minnesota may have been without Napheesa Collier, but let's not pretend this wasn't one of the toughest challenges in the league. First of all, Sherry Reeve is one of the greatest coaches the W has ever seen. Every single year, she finds a way to maximize a roster. This season is another perfect example. The Lynx lost key players from last season. Jessica Shepard left, Natisha Eiderman left, Alana Smith left. Yet, Minnesota remains one of the best teams in basketball. They drafted Olivia Miles, one of the brightest young point guards in the league. Kayla McBride continues to be one of the game's premier shooters. Courtney Williams is still one of the most creative guards in basketball. And despite injuries, they continue to play with incredible discipline. So this wasn't simply another regular season game. This was another measuring stick. And emotionally, it carried even more weight because of everything these two franchises have experienced over the last few seasons. These teams know each other. They respect each other. But as Lonnie Fibish said after the game...
Yeah, I think especially the group who has been here 2024, we know Minnesota really well. We've gone up against them many times, and it's just personal. And I think you saw that today.
And honestly, that's good for the league. The best rivalries don't come from trash talk. They come from repeatedly standing in each other's way. And that's exactly what we have here. One thing I really appreciated from New York in this game was the defensive flexibility. Chris DeMarco and his staff didn't rely on one defensive look all evening. Sometimes they switch, sometimes they pressure the ball, sometimes they pack the paint, and several times they drop into zone. And that's important because if you're trying to win a championship, you cannot become predictable. Against Minnesota, New York constantly changed the picture. Olivia Miles rarely saw the same coverage on consecutive possessions. One trip down the floor, she will see Breanna Stewart. The next, Leonie Fibish. Then help will come from JJ. Then suddenly she will run into a zone. Those constant adjustments slowed Minnesota's rhythm. It wasn't just individual defense, it was collective defense, communication, trust. 5 players working together. That's the biggest difference I noticed compared to some of those losses during the West Coast trip. And earlier in the season, one defensive breakdown often became 3 or 4. Against Minnesota, someone was almost always there to cover for a teammate. That's championship basketball. Not perfect basketball, but connected basketball. One thing I also found really interesting came during shoot-around when I asked Sabrina Ionescu whether Vegas' small ball lineup had actually prepared them for Minnesota's perimeter attack.
Vegas play a lot of small ball in the Cup final, especially in the second half. What did you learn defensively from that game that's going to help you against the strong guards of Minnesota?
Yeah, usually Vegas doesn't play small, so it was kind of a test for us in terms of we had to be able to match up with their guards and we played small, but then we also played big and understood when we did play big, how we were able to kind of capitalize on that. So I think it's just going to help us moving forward, just understanding when we go small, what that looks like and how we can capitalize, but then also knowing when they are small and we go big, what that looks like, because we are so big in a lot of positions that we'll be able to capitalize on their lineups.
I wonder if surviving one challenge had helped prepare them for the next. Those 2 wins against 2 top teams of this league really show that the Liberty do have character and can play with heart. What Sab also said after that Cup final was that what mattered most wasn't simply beating Las Vegas. It was learning how to respond when momentum shifted. The Aces erased a 17-point deficit. Earlier in the season, that might have broken the Liberty mentally. Instead, they stayed together. They slowed the game down, they trusted the execution, they rediscovered how to close. I think it says a lot about where this team is mentally. Basketball is a game of runs. Good teams are going to come back. Nobody holds a double-digit lead forever. The difference is how you respond when it happens. Against Vegas, New York didn't panic. Against Mini, they didn't panic either. And that's growth. Another answer from Sabrina during that shoot-around to me perfectly explained why the Liberty struggled earlier this season.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the reason of lack of those things is because we don't want to. I think it's probably more leaning towards a lot of overthinking in terms of where we want to be and how we want to do things. Everyone's trying to play the right way and different kind of groups of players out there at a time that maybe haven't played together. So I think it's more of a lack of maybe exactly knowing how we're trying to execute and what we're trying to do and being able to be super aggressive, and in terms you're kind of a little bit more tentative, and then you're always a step late. You're always not there on time. You don't go for the 50-50 balls because you're scared to get beat. And so I think for us, it's more just understanding we need to err on the side of playing really aggressive and playing really hard and not always trying to think about being right, but just making the right plays. And our teammates have our back behind us. And I think in that Vegas game, you were able to see a team that didn't play not to lose, but played to win. And when you do that, good things happen.
In other words, it's not always about playing harder. Sometimes it's about playing freer. And against Vegas and Mini, that's exactly what the Liberty looked like. They were not trying not to lose. They were finally playing to win. And for me, that's the biggest takeaway from those 2 victories. Not the trophy, not the standings, not even the quality of the opponents. It was the mindset. For the first time in several weeks, this looked like a team playing with confidence instead of doubt. If they can hold on to that mentality over the next months, then yes, I truly believe those 2 games could become the turning point of their season. Now let's talk about one of my favorite stories of the season, Pauline Astier. Coming into a championship roster, a veteran team, one that's trying to be WNBA champions again. Minutes were not going to be handed to her despite her reputation in Europe. You have to earn them, and Pauline has done exactly that. And she has impressed Sabrina Ionescu as well.
Her ability to step up big every single night, it feels like she's not a rookie out there. We don't feel that. Obviously, she has a ton of experience playing internationally, but we ask a lot of her, and we've all built really good chemistry with her. But her poise, the way she gets better every single game, handling the ball, playing off ball, getting into the paint, finishing, drive, kick. Defensively, she always has really tough assignments as well. And so, obviously, I know all of us up here are super impressed with how she just continues to get better every single night. But big-time player makes big-time plays, and she did that tonight.
What has impressed me most isn't necessarily the statistics, it's the maturity. She plays like someone who understands exactly who she is. She isn't trying to score 20 points. She isn't forcing difficult shots to prove she belongs. She's making the right read. making the extra pass, getting the team into his offense, picking up opposing guards the length of the floor, doing all those little things that don't always show up in the box score but absolutely helps teams win basketball games. Those are the kind of players championship teams need, and I think that's why Chris DeMarco has trusted her more and more over the last few weeks. For years, Sabrina has carried the responsibility of initiating almost every offensive possession, and that's exhausting. Every point guard will tell you that. When you're expected to bring the ball up, organize the offense, create for everyone else, and still score efficiently, it takes a tremendous amount of energy. And Pauline changes that. She gives Sabrina opportunities to play both on and off the ball. Sometimes Pauline initiates the offense while Sabrina comes off screens. Other times, Sabrina handles the ball while Pauline spaces the floor or cuts to the basket. That versatility makes the Liberty much harder to defend. And it's not just Sabrina who's benefited. Look at Jonquel Jones. Look at Stewie. They're getting the ball early in possessions. They're getting deeper post position. The offense simply has better flow. Now, there's another conversation that's starting to emerge. What happens when Satu Sabali comes back? Because eventually she's going to return. And when she does, Chris DeMarco is going to have some very difficult decisions to make. And there are only so many minutes available. Someone's role is going to change. Personally, I don't think Pauline has played herself out of the rotation. In fact, I think she's done the opposite. She has played herself into becoming someone this team now relies on. That doesn't mean she'll continue playing 20-plus minutes every night. Matchups matter. Health matters. The opponent matters. But I think she's earned Chris DeMarco's trust, and trust is one of the hardest things to earn on a veteran team. The other interesting ripple effect is what Pauline's emergence does for Sabrina. If Pauline can handle more of the playmaking responsibilities, Sabrina can conserve energy for what she does best: scoring, creating advantages, making big shots and winning time. We've seen flashes of that over the last 2 games. Instead of having to manufacture every possession herself, Sabrina looked fresher in the fourth quarter. She looked more explosive attacking the basket. She looked more comfortable coming off movement, and that's another reason I'm optimistic about where this team is heading. Pauline's development isn't just adding another good player to the rotation, it's making everyone else around her better. And that's usually the sign of a player whose impact goes well beyond the box score. And speaking of difficult rotation decision, there's one player we need to talk about, because over the last week, no topic has generated more discussion among Liberty fans than the absence of Betnijah Laney-Hamilton. Now let's talk about the biggest talking point among Liberty fans over the past week. Betnijah Laney-Hamilton. You've been on social media, you've seen a debate. Why isn't she playing? Has she fallen out of the rotation? Is something else going on? Those are fair questions, and the fans at the Barclays have chanted their support for her and their desire to see her play. Betnijah has been one of the leaders of this franchise since arriving in New York. She helped change the culture before Stewie and JJ ever signed here. She was an all-star. She has guarded the opponent's best perimeter player night after night. She's hit huge shots in playoff games. You simply don't erase that. But she's coming back from a serious knee injury that kept her away last year, and then missed some time early in the season due to personal reasons. It doesn't help to get into rhythm. And when she came back, you could tell that she needed some reps to feel herself again offensively. But one constant is a defense, which offers tons of options for the Liberty on that side of the court. The West Coast trip, though, didn't go as planned for the team. She was rested for some games as precautionary measures, was on the roster in LA but didn't play. So you would have expected Betnijah to play against Vegas and Mini because you feel like a game will help against those kind of opponents. But it didn't happen. And Chris DeMarco was asked about it after the Commissioner's Cup final and after the game against Minnesota, and almost word for word said the same thing.
Yeah, we obviously didn't play a lot of players tonight. I still have confidence in her. Our staff players have confidence in her. She's going to get her opportunity again. Like, we believe in her. It's just didn't go to her tonight, but we know what she can do, and we'll get there.
So the question is she not fully healthy yet? The coach said she was. So is it because another player forces the coach to make difficult decisions? Pauline Astier has earned more opportunities. Leonie Fibish continues to play heavy minutes because of her versatility on both ends of the floor. Sabrina Ionescu is back to playing at her level. There are only so many minutes available, and that's the reality of coaching a championship caliber roster. Now, does that mean Betnijah cannot help this team anymore? Absolutely not. In fact, I think there are going to be playoff series where experience, physicality, and defensive toughness become incredibly valuable. And that's why I think it's far too early to declare Betnijah's role over. And if there's one thing we've learned about Betnijah over the years, is that she's always ready. But it's hard to stay ready if you don't get on the court and that the reasons given are not fully clear. It creates a challenge for Chris DeMarco. One of the hardest parts of coaching isn't necessarily drawing up plays. It's managing people. It's keeping everyone engaged, keeping everyone prepared, making sure players who are not seeing the floor still feel valued. And that's incredibly difficult, especially in a locker room filled with veterans who have accomplished so much. From everything we heard throughout the season, though, this group generally supports one another. The players have said that they are here for Betnijah, and I really hope that things will get better. In solidarity, a lot of fans have decided this Tuesday for the Dallas game to wear Betnijah Laney-Hamilton gears as a support and silent process, so let's see how it goes. Before we wrap up today's episode, let's take a quick look at the next challenge waiting for the Liberty, the Dallas Wings. And this is one of those games that can quietly tell us a lot. Not because Dallas is ahead of us in the standings, but because consistency has been the biggest question surrounding the Liberty this season. Can they bring the same intensity after 2 emotional victories? Can they avoid the letdown that we've seen at different points this year? Can they continue defending with the same connectivity? Can Sabrina continue playing this aggressively? Can Jonquel Jones continue dominating inside? Can Stewie continue setting the tone? Those are the questions I'll be asking myself during the game. We all remember how the first matchup between those two teams ended up. The Wings, after trailing in the first half, dominated the second under the leadership of Paige Beckers and a breakout game from Azzi Fudd. The Liberty's offense looked stagnant, and the defense struggled to communicate and stay together effectively. For the Liberty, chasing the crown isn't about winning one trophy. It's about stacking championship habits. One great defensive possession after another, one unselfish pass after another, one winning performance after another. And that's what separates champions from contenders. And for the first time in several weeks, I truly believe the Liberty are starting to look like champions again. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Liberty FM. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe whenever you get your podcast. You could also follow us on X, Instagram, and YouTube for more Liberty coverage, player interviews, post-game reactions, and exclusive content throughout the season. I'm François. Thanks for listening, and as we always say, let's go Liberty!